The valley did not exist the day before. Every map of the kingdom was clear about that. The mountains stood where they always had. The forests stretched across the same hills they had for centuries. But after the great earthquake split the earth and shook the capital's towers, something new appeared between two ancient ridges. A valley. Deep, wide, and completely unknown. When the dust settled and the ground stopped trembling, travelers returning from the northern roads were the first to see it. Where there had once been only rocky terrain now lay a vast hollow carved into the land itself, as if the earth had suddenly opened its mouth. At first people believed it was simply damage from the quake. The kingdom had seen landslides before. But this was different. The valley was too smooth, too perfectly shaped, and far deeper than any natural collapse. Then the lights began. Every night, after the sun disappeared beyond the mountains, a strange glow would rise from the depths of the valley. Sometimes it flickered softly like distant lanterns. Other times it pulsed bright enough to paint the surrounding cliffs in pale blue light. Shepherds watching from the hills said the lights moved. Not randomly. Slowly. Deliberately. The first person to enter the valley was a hunter from a nearby village. He believed the glow might be treasure or travelers camping below. He took his bow, followed the narrow path down the cliffs, and disappeared into the mist that hung over the valley floor. He never returned. At first, no one panicked. Hunters often stayed away for days. But when a week passed without any sign of him, two of his friends went searching. They followed the same trail down into the valley. They vanished as well. Soon the story spread through every village along the northern border. Anyone who entered the valley never came back out. No screams echoed up the cliffs. No bodies were discovered. No tracks led back to the path. Just silence. But the lights continued. Each night they shimmered deeper in the valley, drifting slowly across the mist like wandering stars that had fallen to earth. Fear began to grow. Some villagers claimed the earthquake had opened a prison buried beneath the mountains. Others whispered that something ancient had been sleeping under the earth for thousands of years, and the quake had awakened it. Most people simply refused to go near the place. Caravans avoided the road entirely. Shepherds moved their flocks to distant hills. Even the bravest hunters chose forests far from the valley's edge. But fear in the villages could not hide the valley from the kingdom forever. Eventually the rumors reached the capital. The king listened carefully as messengers described the glowing lights and the missing villagers. At first he believed the stories were exaggerated. Panic had a way of turning ordinary dangers into supernatural legends. But when royal mapmakers confirmed something impossible, the matter became far more serious. The valley truly had not existed before the earthquake. Ancient records, border maps, and military surveys all showed the same thing. That stretch of land had once been solid mountain terrain. There had been no valley, no hidden basin, and certainly no glowing lights. Something had changed the land itself. The king could not ignore that. If the valley hid enemy forces, it threatened the northern border. If it contained unknown resources, another kingdom might discover it first. And if the disappearances continued, fear would spread across the countryside. He needed answers. So he turned to the kingdom's finest warriors. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were veterans who had survived countless battles, men trained to face danger without hesitation. They had crossed deserts, climbed frozen passes, and crushed raiding armies that once threatened the realm. If anything waited inside that valley, these warriors would discover it. The king ordered a small but elite expedition to investigate. Their mission was simple: enter the valley, locate the source of the lights, and return with a full report. At dawn the warriors rode north from the capital. Villagers gathered along the road to watch them pass. Their armor gleamed beneath the rising sun, and their banners carried the symbol of the kingdom's strongest battalion. Confidence followed them like a shadow. When they reached the cliffs overlooking the valley, they saw the mist for the first time. It spread across the basin like a pale ocean, hiding everything below. The valley was deeper than anyone expected, its walls descending steeply into the white haze. The warriors studied the terrain, then located the narrow trail used by the missing hunter. Without hesitation, they began the descent. From the cliffs above, the villagers watched until the last helmet disappeared into the mist. That night the lights returned. But they were brighter than before. They flickered and surged across the valley floor, rising and fading in strange patterns that lasted until morning. Days passed. No signal fires appeared. No riders returned. At first the kingdom waited patiently. Expeditions sometimes took time, especially in unknown terrain. But a week passed. Then another. Still no message came from the valley. The finest warriors the kingdom had sent had vanished into the mist, and the glowing lights continued to move across the darkness below. The kingdom waited for the warriors to return. At first no one believed anything had gone wrong. The soldiers sent into the valley were the most disciplined fighters the realm possessed. They had crossed enemy territories, endured brutal winters, and survived battles that would have broken ordinary men. A simple investigation into a strange valley should not have challenged them. Yet the silence continued. A single day without a message could be explained. 2 days meant they were still exploring. A week suggested delays caused by the terrain. But when the second week passed without even a signal fire rising above the cliffs, concern began spreading through the capital. Those warriors were trained to report their position regularly. Even in dangerous territory, they would send scouts or light-coated fires that could be seen from miles away. Their absence meant something deeply unusual had happened. Messengers were sent to the northern villages to gather more information. The reports they returned with were unsettling. The lights inside the valley had not stopped. In fact, several villagers claimed they had become stronger since the warriors entered. The glow moved across the mist more frequently, sometimes forming long streaks that slid silently across the valley floor before fading again into darkness. One shepherd swore he had heard distant echoes during the night. Metal striking metal. Shouts that carried faintly through the cliffs before disappearing. No one could confirm the sounds. But the silence that followed them was impossible to ignore. The king studied every report carefully. Losing contact with a small expedition was troubling, but not enough to abandon the mission. The valley might contain hostile forces or unknown dangers that had simply overwhelmed the first group. If that was the case, the kingdom needed to respond with greater strength. He ordered a second expedition. This time the force would be larger, better supplied, and led by some of the most experienced commanders in the royal army. Scouts, trackers, and engineers joined the formation, each chosen for their ability to survive in hostile terrain. Their objective was clear. Enter the valley. Find the missing warriors. And uncover whatever threat had swallowed them. When the new expedition reached the northern cliffs, they discovered something that unsettled even the most hardened veterans. The trail used by the first group was still visible. Boot prints and hoof marks remained pressed into the dirt where the warriors had descended into the valley weeks earlier. But there were no tracks coming back out. Not a single one. It looked as if the entire group had walked into the mist and simply vanished from the world. The commanders studied the ground carefully, searching for signs of battle or retreat. Broken branches, scattered equipment, or bloodstains would have explained the disappearance. They found nothing. The earth was undisturbed beyond the descending footprints. Whatever had happened to the first expedition had left no trace behind. Despite the unease spreading through the soldiers, the mission continued. The warriors tightened their armor, checked their weapons, and began moving down the narrow path into the valley. From above, the watching villagers saw them disappear into the same pale mist that had swallowed the others. Night fell soon after. The lights returned almost immediately. But this time they behaved differently. Instead of drifting slowly across the valley floor, the glowing shapes flashed rapidly through the fog. Bright streaks surged from one side of the valley to the other, vanishing and reappearing as if something powerful was moving beneath the mist. The lights grew brighter as the night deepened. Then, for a brief moment, a sharp flash burst from the center of the valley. The glow lit the surrounding cliffs so brightly that the watching villagers could see shadows racing across the mist below. Some claimed they heard distant shouting carried on the wind. Others said the ground trembled again, though no earthquake followed. Whatever happened inside the valley lasted only a few minutes. Then everything stopped. The lights faded. The mist returned to its quiet stillness. Morning revealed nothing. No signal fires rose into the sky. No riders climbed the trail back toward the cliffs. The valley remained silent, hiding whatever had taken place during the night. Days passed. Then weeks. The second expedition never returned. 2 groups of the kingdom's finest warriors had entered the valley with full armor, weapons, and training that had defeated countless enemies. Both had vanished without leaving a single survivor. By the time the reports reached the capital, the king understood something terrifying. This was no ordinary battlefield. Something inside that valley was hunting them. The loss of 2 elite expeditions shook the entire kingdom. Warriors could fall in battle. Armies could lose against powerful enemies. But complete disappearance without evidence was something far more disturbing. No survivors, no captured soldiers, not even scattered remains had been discovered. It was as if the valley erased everything that entered it. The king refused to send more warriors blindly into the mist. Courage alone would not defeat an enemy that could not even be seen. Instead, he ordered a different strategy. The valley would be watched. Small groups of scouts were sent to the surrounding hills with strict orders. They were never to descend into the valley itself. Their task was simple: observe from a distance and report anything unusual. The scouts built hidden camps among the rocks overlooking the basin. From those high ridges they could see the entire valley floor, at least when the mist thinned enough to reveal shapes beneath it. For several nights nothing happened. The valley remained quiet, wrapped in pale fog that drifted slowly between the cliffs. The scouts began to wonder if the lights had been exaggerated by frightened villagers. Then the 4th night arrived. Just after sunset, a faint glow appeared deep inside the mist. It started as a small flicker, barely visible from the cliffs. But within minutes more lights appeared beside it. Then more. Soon the valley floor shimmered with movement. The lights did not stay still. They glided across the fog in long arcs, sometimes separating into smaller sparks before merging again into brighter shapes. Watching from above, the scouts realized something unsettling. The lights were not random. They moved with direction. Several times the glow surged rapidly toward the cliffs before stopping suddenly, as if something below had sensed the watchers above. The scouts held their breath each time the lights approached, afraid that whatever controlled them might climb the valley walls. But the glow always retreated back into the mist. As the nights passed, the scouts noticed other details. Massive shadows occasionally shifted beneath the fog. They were large enough to disturb the mist itself, pushing waves of pale vapor outward as they moved across the valley floor. No creature was clearly visible. Yet the size of those shifting shapes suggested something enormous was traveling through the basin. Days later, one of the scouts discovered the first physical evidence of what had happened to the lost warriors. Near the valley's edge, half buried in loose dirt, lay a shattered sword. The weapon carried the insignia of the king's army. Its steel blade had been twisted into a shape no human force could easily create. The metal looked as if it had been crushed by overwhelming pressure before being thrown toward the cliff. More discoveries followed. Fragments of armor appeared along the valley's border over the next few days. A broken shield. Pieces of chain mail. A dented helmet split along its side. All of them were badly damaged. But none carried bloodstains. More importantly, none were attached to bodies. The valley returned only broken equipment, while keeping the warriors themselves. The scouts brought the fragments back to the capital along with their reports. They described the moving lights, the shifting shadows, and the unnatural patterns they had witnessed during the nights. When the king studied the damaged weapons, the truth became impossible to ignore. The warriors had not simply been lost. They had been destroyed by something far stronger than human soldiers. And whatever lived inside the valley was intelligent enough to hunt intruders while leaving almost no trace behind. The earthquake had not created the valley. It had opened something that had been buried beneath the mountains for a very long time. Something ancient. Something powerful. And something that did not allow anything that entered its territory to leave alive. The kingdom now understood the truth. 2 expeditions of elite warriors had entered the valley with the best weapons, training, and leadership the realm could offer. None had returned. The fragments of armor recovered from the cliffs proved they had fought something powerful, something capable of crushing steel as if it were soft clay. Yet the enemy itself had never been clearly seen. No soldier had survived long enough to describe it. No scout had dared step close enough to reveal its shape. All that remained were moving lights, enormous shadows beneath the mist, and the broken remains of warriors who had once believed nothing in the world could defeat them. The king gathered his council and listened to every report again. Some generals demanded another expedition, one far larger than the previous forces. They argued that a full army could sweep through the valley and destroy whatever creature hid inside it. Others believed fire could clear the basin, burning away the mist and forcing the enemy into the open. But the king understood something the others had begun to overlook. Strength had already failed. Courage had already failed. The finest warriors in the kingdom had entered the valley prepared for battle, and the valley had swallowed them without effort. Sending more soldiers would not bring victory. It would only give the unknown enemy more victims. So the king made a decision that surprised many of his generals. The valley would not be conquered. It would be sealed. Orders were sent across the northern territories immediately. Engineers, builders, and soldiers were dispatched to the cliffs surrounding the basin. Instead of preparing for war, they began constructing massive stone barriers along the few paths that led down into the mist. The narrow trail used by the missing expeditions was buried beneath tons of rock. Other entrances were blocked by thick walls reinforced with iron gates. Guard towers were built on the high ridges where scouts had once watched the glowing lights. The instructions given to those guards were simple. No one enters the valley. Travelers were warned to stay far from the area. Caravans were rerouted along safer roads. Villages closest to the cliffs were gradually relocated deeper into the kingdom where the strange glow could no longer be seen from their windows at night. Within a single year the valley became a forbidden place. Time passed, and the kingdom slowly recovered from the loss of its warriors. New soldiers were trained, new commanders rose through the ranks, and the northern borders remained peaceful. But the valley never changed. Even generations later, guards stationed along the distant towers still reported the same strange phenomenon. Some nights the mist below the cliffs would begin to glow. Faint lights drifted slowly across the valley floor just as they had on the night the first hunter disappeared. Occasionally enormous shadows disturbed the fog for a few seconds before fading again into silence. The guards never investigated. They simply watched from the safety of the walls and recorded what they saw. The kingdom had learned a difficult lesson from the valley. Human strength could conquer armies. Human courage could defeat monsters. But human wisdom meant understanding when a battle should never be fought. And so the valley remained sealed, hidden behind stone and guarded by strict laws that no traveler dared ignore. Because everyone remembered the truth that had changed the kingdom forever. They had sent their best warriors. All were lost. And none survived to tell the story.